A month ago, I made a video talking about homosexuality during chattel slavery. And I talked about and discussed the idea that queer relationships happened between enslaved people. Consenting queer relationships could have happened between enslaved people because LGBTQIA plus people would have also been enslaved Black people. And people really, not all, most of y'all didn't, because most of my audience traffics in intelligence, but some people really took issue with the video. And I don't know, like, I do think that it is in part the way that I frame things and the way that I discuss things, but I'm sorry if I have stuff on my face. I'm at lunch, so I'm eating. I think some people also misinterpreted what I was trying to do with the video. And some people are just straight up denying the idea that queer people could have existed during chattel slavery. And the main reason that they're citing for this is the fact that slave masters would often essay their slaves, which is something that I acknowledged at the top of the video. I made the point to acknowledge that same-sex relations between queer people of different races, especially one where one of the people was a white person, could not be consensual in the context or the terms that we know consensuality to mean today. Period. Point blank. Obviously. And I thought I was very clear on that. Acknowledge that. And I took that piece, and what I thought I did was set it to the side so that I could then open up the pathway to discussing the ways in which two Black people could still be in a same-sex intimate relationship, and the fact that despite being victims of assault, queer people could still be queer and be enslaved despite possibly being victims of non-consensual relationships. Those two things could exist at one time, and I thought I was very clear on that. The main critique or the main pushback I get on that ideology is the fact that, well, because they were victims of SA, they couldn't have been just queer on their own. There's no way they could just be queer. They were victims of SA, and so that turned them gay. That turned them queer because they were buck broken. I'm gonna read y'all something from a script that I was working on for a video that I meant to make during Pride Month, and I need y'all to sit with me through this and just listen. Don't type, don't talk, don't think, just listen. Okay? I'll be back.
According to minorityafrica.org, in pre-colonial Africa, trans identity was not only recognized by many different societies, but given space to simply exist. The Mudoku Dako, or effeminate men of the Longi people, were treated as women, and it was perfectly acceptable for them to marry men. Transgender people of pre-colonial African societies were acknowledged for the duality of their existence and believed by their tribes to possess unique spiritual connection because of this duality. In fact, trans mediums in some societies would be called Okule and Agule. The Chibidos of Angola were male diviners who would channel feminine spirits by behaving like women.
Okay, now I'm gonna hold y'all hands, and we're gonna walk together toward this point. With that context in mind, I'm gonna hold y'all's hands, and let's walk together to this point, right? So here we go. If queer people existed during pre-colonial Africa, what makes y'all think that they stopped being queer when they got on American soil? If queer people, I'm gonna say it 3 times like Umar Johnson, if queer people were documented as being queer and existing in pre-colonial Africa, what makes y'all think that they stopped being queer when they got to America? If queer people, I can't do it. I don't even know how that nigga do it. But and even to go further with that point, hopefully I didn't lose it. The point of my video was for us to hold space for both realities. The fact that queer Black people existed both during chattel slavery, before chattel slavery, and after chattel slavery, and the fact that queer Black people could have experienced same-sex intimate violence. In fact, they may have even been targeted specifically because they were same-sex attracted. Have we ever stopped to consider that? Like, we talk so much about buck breaking, and we talk so much about YT slave masters using SA as a tool of emasculation, I don't know what the word is, of emasculating black men. But have we ever stopped to think that there may have been YT people, male and female, because what we're not gonna do is act like the women weren't SAing as well, okay? That these YT people may not have observed queer behaviors in certain slaves and targeted those slaves as a means of acting out their own homosexuality. My goal with the conversation wasn't to talk about queerness, homosexuality, and same-sex relations between master and slave. And maybe that was confusing. Maybe that's my fault. And I'll hold the L, okay? But what I wanted to do was talk about the ways in which queerness could have shown up in black people who experienced chattel slavery. And because that kind of history would very clearly be obscured, because, you know, homosexuality was a criminal act, and also black people were dealing with enough. I'm sure that black people were not keen on documenting aspects of their realities that would have further persecuted and harmed them. So if there were gay black people, I'm sure their asses were like, I got enough problems being black, let me not add to it by saying that I like pussy too. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I want to leave y'all with a few pieces of history that I did find when I was doing my research for this topic. On one of the slave ships that was coming over, I want to say it was either the Americas or the Caribbean, the ships were separated by gender, and there was a female captured person by the name of Minty on one slave. Minty had a documented last name from her husband, from her marriage that was, you know, of course, subsequently broken up because, you know, she was captured. But she also had a last name that she had taken on from another female slave, or rather, I'm sorry, another woman on the ship that was captured. And historians who research these things and have been trying to kind of trace the origins of queerness during chattel slavery, the same way that I'm wanting to do, have pointed to this as a possibility, I will admit, a possibility of an intimate relationship and devotion to another woman, between two same-sex attracted women. And this is not unique. There were laws of anti-sodomy that were explicitly enforced against enslaved people, which points to the idea that in order for them to enact laws against same-sex relations between black people, that they had to have probably witnessed that behavior, as well as a few other documented things that kind of signal to historians that same-sex relations and intimacy are not unique to enslaved people, that this was something that was happening. And yes, it was obscured throughout history, but this is something that more than likely happened. And I made that video during Pride Month because when I talk about black history, especially black American history, my point in discussing black American history is to humanize black people by discussing the ways in which we contribute to the history of humankind overall. That means discussing things that are more human than anything else: love, happiness, joy, fear, heartbreak, etc. I have more to say. I'm gonna end this here, but I've got a part 2. I'm gonna come back. the human experience through a Black American lens, because I know that more often than not, we are dehumanized. And when we focus on slavery, it's very easy to think of the dehumanization aspect of it, because I used to until an old friend of mine kind of challenged me to reframe the way that I think about slavery and really view these people not through the lens of what happened to them, but how they navigated life as being enslaved people, because they still lived lives, y'all. They still lived lives, and they still lived the full range of the human experience. And a part of the human experience are things like love, sex, intimacy. And love, sex, and intimacy are not, and I know y'all hate it, I know y'all can't stand this, but love, sex, and intimacy is not exclusive to heterosexual people. It's not. Just like heterosexual people are not the only people on the planet. I mean, I really hate to be the bearer of bad news. I hate it for y'all, but gay people, straight people ain't the only people alive. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And never have been. And so a part of me discussing Black history and discussing history through the lens of enslaved people means exploring all elements of what their lives could have looked like. And obviously that month was Pride Month, so that's why I was talking about, queer Black American history. Yeah. So when I see people who want to attribute homosexuality in Black American people to buck breaking or SA, I have to say, I think y'all are doing a great disservice to our ancestors. Excuse me, because at the end of the day, yes, our ancestors were enslaved and all manner of brutality was committed against them, but they were also still their own people. And that means that they may have had a wide range of ways that their humanity showed up. They may have expressed themselves in many ways. There were Black creatives during chattel slavery. There were philosophers during chattel slavery. There were scientists that were enslaved people. And yes, there were queer people during chattel slavery. And to attribute their identity to just, I guess, reducing it down to just the trauma that they faced or sustained, because it's almost as if some of y'all are saying that, and I know y'all are using the Equiano and Frederick Douglass because I use those examples and I understand that, but I was trying to open a dialogue for us to think bigger by kind of using Equiano and Douglass as like the vehicles for us to get, you know what I'm saying, to have the conversation. Point in bringing them up was so that we could discuss the idea that homosexuality would have shown up in slavery, and enslaved people would have been, you know what I mean? So when y'all are like, oh, well, they were raped and SA'd, that's why they were queer. Okay, well, what about all the queer people who were raped and SA'd by the opposite sex during the, what about the lesbian Black women or the Black women who were enslaved who liked and had relations with other women, although I know y'all have a hard time wrapping your head around it, that were raped by their masters and other men on the plantation? Y'all erase queerness from the fabric of human history and act as if it is something that was introduced and it wasn't. There is too much evidence of queer people existing for hundreds of thousands of years and pre-colonialism for us to pretend like homosexuality is the new idea. It's not. And that was what I was trying to open the dialogue about. Now, before I let y'all go, I gotta tell y'all a little bit more about queerness and queer people and how queerness shows up in enslaved people. So I talked about William Darcy Swann in part 1. William Darcy Swann, for those of y'all that don't know, was the godmother of drag, of ballroom culture. He was a black man formerly enslaved who would host drag balls where he and his friends would wear gowns and women's costumes and jewelry and things like that, and they would have a big party with food and dance, and they would perform. They were doing drag shows. That was what it was. It was ballroom, it was drag. That's what it was. At these shows and in attendance at these parties were 2 black men by the names of Pierce Lafayette and Felix Hall. And these were the first previously enslaved men to ever be documented as a couple. They were a same-sex couple, and they also experienced slavery. They were known to be intimate. They were known to attend these balls. They were known to be together and to be in love. And William Darcy Swann and the environment that he created was a safe place for black people, black men, black gender non-conforming individuals to come together to express that aspect of themselves and that aspect of who they were in a place where because they typically couldn't. Outside of him, you had A'Lelia Walker, who is Madam C.J. Walker's daughter, who would host grand, giant parties where mostly black queer people would be in attendance. It was artists, it was poets, it was thinkers, it was authors, it was college students, it was etc., etc., etc. But one of the main comments that was written down was that many couples were same-sex couples, and that was expected, and that was okay, and that was welcome in that environment. A'Lelia Walker and many of her peers would have been 1 generation removed from slavery if some of them weren't enslaved themselves. This was in the 1920s. Darcy Swann and his friends, they were having parties in the 1880s and 90s. After Darcy passed, his brother took up the mantle of hosting the balls and was still making costumes and things for their friends. Genderqueer and gender nonconforming and LGBTQ people existed during chattel slavery, before chattel slavery, and after chattel slavery. There were gay and trans and non-binary enslaved black people. Period. That part's not up for discussion. This was supposed to be a dialogue, but that part's not up for discussion. And so I hope that this little series of videos, hopefully it's just 2. I might have to break it down to 3. Y'all know I'm a long-winded ass bitch. But hopefully these couple of videos here help you guys to understand what it was that I was trying to say. Now with this, can we move forward? I don't want to see no more comments about, oh, they were raped, they were essayed, so it doesn't count. Don't take away those men's autonomy. That was done enough during their lifetime. How they chose to live their lives and the partners they chose for themselves when they weren't being coerced and forced into relationships is important. And some of them chose to be in same-sex relationships with other enslaved people. And that is something that I wanted to have a conversation about and that I wanted to explore. But what we're not going to do is sit here and pretend that every single black person that was enslaved was straight, and that any black person who may have expressed any kind of queerness was just a victim of SA, because there was no way that they could have been gay before they were assaulted. We're not doing that. Have a good day. Thank y'all for 50K followers.